Title 1, 114 to 123 Crimes Against National Security and the Law of Nations. Chapter 1, Crimes Against National Security. Section 1. Treason and Espionage. Article 114. Treason. Any Filipino citizen who levies war against the Philippines or adheres to her enemies, giving them aid or comfort within the Philippines or elsewhere, shall be punished by reclusion perpetua to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 4 million pesos. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses at least to the same overt act or on confession of the accused in open court. Likewise, an alien, residing in the Philippine Islands, who commits acts of treason as defined in paragraph 1 of this article shall be punished by reclusion temporal to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 4 million pesos. Elements. 1. That the offender is a Filipino citizen or an alien residing in the Philippines. 2. That there is war in which the Philippines is involved. 3. That the offender either a. levies war against the government, or b. adheres to the enemies, giving them aid or comfort. Who are liable for treason? Filipino citizen, wherever he may be. Alien, residing in the Philippines. Treason, defined, allegiance defined. Treason is a breach of allegiance to a government, committed by a person who owes allegiance to it. Allegiance is meant the obligation of fidelity and obedience which the individual owes to the government under which they live or to their sovereign, in return for the protection they receive. Ways or mode of committing treason. By levying war against the government. Requires the concurrence of 2 things. 1. That there be an actual assembling of men, and 2. For the purpose of executing a treasonable design by force. By adhering to the enemies of the Philippines, giving them aid or comfort. Adherence to the enemy means intent to betray. There is adherence to the enemy when a citizen intellectually or emotionally favors the enemy and harbors sympathies or convictions disloyal to his country's policy or interest. Aid or comfort means an act which strengthens or tends to strengthen the enemy in the conduct of war against the traitor's country and an act which weakens or tends to weaken the power of the traitor's country to resist or to attack the enemy. Specific acts of aid or comfort constituting treason. Serving as informer and active member of the Japanese military police arresting guerrilla suspects. Serving in the Japanese army as agent or spy and participating in the raid of guerrilla hideout. Acting as finger woman. Taking active part in the mass killing of civilians by the Japanese soldiers by personally tying the hands of the victims. Being a makapilot. Ways of proving treason. 1. Testimony of 2 witnesses, at least, to the same overt act, or 2. Confession of the accused in open court. 2. Witness rule. The testimony of 2 witnesses is required to prove the overt act of giving aid or comfort. It is not necessary to prove adherence. An overt act is defined as that physical activity, that deed that constitutes the rendering of aid and comfort. Adherence may be proved by 1. One witness. 2. From the nature of the act itself, or 3. From the circumstances surrounding the act. Article 115. Conspiracy and proposal to commit treason, penalty. The conspiracy or proposal to commit the crime of treason shall be punished respectively, by prison mayor and a fine not exceeding 2 million pesos, and by prison correctional and a fine not exceeding 1 million pesos. How committed? Conspiracy to commit treason is committed when in time of war, 2 or more persons come to an agreement to levy war against the government or to adhere to the enemies and to give them aid or comfort, and decide to commit it. Proposal to commit treason is committed when in time of war a person who has decided to levy war against the government or to adhere to the enemies and to give them aid or comfort, proposes its execution to some other person or persons. Article 116. Misprision of treason. Every person owing allegiance to the United States, the government of the Philippine Islands, without being a foreigner, and having knowledge of any conspiracy against them, conceals or does not disclose and make known the same, as soon as possible to the governor or fiscal of the province, or the mayor or fiscal of the city in which he resides, as the case may be, shall be punished as an accessory to the crime of treason. Elements. 1. That the offender must be owing allegiance to the government, Filipino citizen, and not a foreigner. 2. That he has knowledge of any conspiracy, to commit treason, against the government. 3. That he conceals or does not disclose and make known the same as soon as possible to the governor or fiscal of the province or the mayor or fiscal of the city in which he resides. Note. Can be committed by Filipinos only. The conspiracy is one to commit treason. Does not apply when the crime of treason is already committed by someone and the accused does not report its commission to the proper authority. The offender is punished as an accessory to treason. But offender is charged as principal, so, Art. 20 does not apply. Article 117. Espionage. The penalty of prison correctional shall be inflicted upon any person who, without authority therefore, enters a warship, fort, or naval or military establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plans, photographs, or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippine archipelago, or being in possession, by reason of the public office he holds, of the articles, data, or information referred to in the preceding paragraph, discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. The penalty next higher in degree shall be imposed if the offender be a public officer or employee. Espionage, defined. Espionage is the offense of gathering, transmitting, or losing information respecting the national defense with the intent or reason to believe that the information is to be used to the injury of the Republic of the Philippines or to the advantage of any foreign nation. Elements. 1. By entering, without authority therefore, a warship, fort, or naval or military establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plans, photographs or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. A. That the offender enters any of the places mentioned therein. B. That he has no authority therefore. C. That his purpose is to obtain information, plans, photographs or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. 2. By disclosing to the representative of a foreign nation the contents of the articles, data, or information referred to in paragraph number 1 of Article 117, which he had in his possession by reason of the public office he holds. A. That the offender is a public officer. B. That he has in his possession the articles, data, or information referred to in paragraph number 1 of Art. 117, by reason of the public office he holds. C. That he discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. Note. 1. The offender must have the intention to obtain information relative to the defense of the Philippines. 2. It is not necessary that information, etc., is obtained. 3. Persons liable in 2 ways of committing espionage. Compare with CA 616. Espionage distinguished from treason. Espionage is not a crime conditioned by the citizenship of the offender. May be committed both in time of peace and time of war and in many ways. Treason. Same. Committed only in time of war and limited in 2 ways only. Section 2. Provoking war and disloyalty in case of war. Article 118. Inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals. The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee, and that of prison mayor upon any private individual, who, by unlawful or unauthorized acts provokes or gives occasion for a war involving or liable to involve the Philippine Islands or exposes Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Elements. 1. That the offender performs unlawful or unauthorized acts. 2. That such acts provoke or give occasion for a war involving or liable to involve the Philippines or expose Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Note. Intention of the offender is immaterial. committed in time of peace. Penalty is higher when the offender is a public officer or employee. Article 119. Violation of neutrality. The penalty of prison correctional shall be inflicted upon anyone who, on the occasion of a war in which the government is not involved, violates any regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality. Elements. 1. That there is a war in which the Philippines is not involved. 2. That there is a regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality. 3. That the offender violates such regulation. Neutrality is defined as when a nation or power which takes no part in a contest of arms going on between others is referred to as neutral. Reminder, there must be regulation issued by competent authority for the enforcement of neutrality. Article 120. Correspondence with hostile country. Any person who in time of war shall have correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops shall be punished. 1. By prison correctional, if the correspondence has been prohibited by the government. 2. By prison mayor, if such correspondence be carried on in ciphers or conventional signs, and 3. By reclusion temporal, if notice or information be given thereby which might be useful to the enemy. If the offender intended to aid the enemy by giving such notice or information, he shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal to death. Elements. 1. That it is in time of war in which the Philippines is involved. 2. That the offender makes correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops. 3. That the correspondence is either a. prohibited by the government, or b. carried on in ciphers or conventional signs, or c. containing notice or information which might be useful to the enemy. Correspondence is communication by means of letters, or it may refer to the letters which pass between those who have friendly or business relations. Reminder: even if correspondence contains innocent matters, if the correspondence has been prohibited by the government, it is punishable. Prohibition by the government is not essential in paragraph 2 and 3 of Art. 120. Circumstances qualifying the offense. The following must concur together. A. That the notice or information might be useful to the enemy. B. That the offender intended to aid the enemy. Tn. If the offender intended to aid the enemy by giving such notice or information, the crime amounts to treason, hence, the penalty is the same as that of treason. Article 121. Flight to enemy country. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be inflicted upon any person who, owing allegiance to the government, attempts to flee or go to an enemy country when prohibited by competent authority. Elements. 1. That there is a war in which the Philippines is involved. 2. That the offender must be owing allegiance to the government. 3. That the offender attempts to flee or go to enemy country. 4. That going to enemy country is prohibited by competent authority. Note: an alien resident may be guilty of flight to enemy country. Mere attempt to flee or go to enemy country consummates the crime. Section 3. Piracy and mutiny on the high seas or in Philippine waters. Article 122. Piracy in general and mutiny on the high seas. The penalty of reclusion perpetua shall be inflicted upon any person who, on the high seas or Philippine waters, shall attack or seize a vessel or, not being a member of its complement nor a passenger, shall seize the whole or part of the cargo of said vessel, its equipment, or personal belongings of its complement or passengers. The same penalty shall be inflicted in case of mutiny on the high seas or in Philippine waters. 2 ways or modes of committing piracy. 1. By attacking or seizing a vessel on the high seas or in Philippine waters. 2. By seizing in the vessel while on the high seas or in Philippine waters the whole or part of its cargo, its equipment, or personal belongings of its complement or passengers. Elements. That a vessel is on the high seas or in Philippine waters. That the offenders are not members of its complement or passengers of the vessel. That the offenders, a. attack or seize that vessel, or b. seize the whole or part of the cargo of said vessel, its equipment, or personal belongings of its complement or passengers. Piracy and mutiny defined. Piracy is the robbery or forcible depredation on the high seas, without lawful authority and done with animo furandi and in the spirit and intention of universal hostility. Mutiny is the unlawful resistance to a superior officer, or the raising of commotions and disturbances on board a ship against the authority of its commander. Piracy and mutiny distinguished. Piracy. The persons who attack or seize its cargo are strangers to said vessels. Intent to gain is essential. Mutiny. They are members of the crew or passengers. Intend to ignore the ship's officers, or they may be prompted by the desire to commit plunder. Piracy and mutiny as terrorism. Under RA number 9372, otherwise known as the Human Security Act of 2007, as approved on March 6, 2007, a person who commits an act punishable as piracy and mutiny under Art. 122 thereby sowing and creating a condition of widespread and extraordinary fear and panic among the populace, in order to coerce the government to give in to an unlawful demand, shall be guilty of the crime of terrorism, and shall suffer the penalty of 40 years of imprisonment, without the benefit of parole. Article 123. Qualified piracy. The penalty of reclusion perpetua to death shall be imposed upon those who commit any of the crimes referred to in the preceding article, under any of the following circumstances. 1. Whenever they have seized a vessel by boarding or firing upon the same. 2. Whenever the pirates have abandoned their victims without means of saving themselves, or 3. Whenever the crime is accompanied by murder, homicide, physical injuries, or rape. Paragraph 2 of Art. 123 specifically mentions pirates, thereby excluding mutineers from said paragraph. It would seem, however, that it should be in paragraph 1 where the word pirates should be specifically mentioned and not in paragraph 2, because in paragraph 1, the mutineers, being already in the vessel, cannot seize the vessel by boarding or firing upon the same. Excerpts from RA number 6235. An act prohibiting certain acts inimical to civil aviation. Sector 1. It shall be unlawful for any person to compel a change in the course or destination of an aircraft of Philippine registry, or to seize or usurp the control thereof, while it is in flight. An aircraft is in flight from the moment all its external doors are closed following embarkation until any of such doors is opened for disembarkation. It shall likewise be unlawful for any person to compel an aircraft of foreign registry to land in the Philippine territory, or to seize or usurp the control thereof while it is within the said territory. Sector 3. It shall be unlawful for any person, natural or juridical, to ship, load or carry in any passenger aircraft operating as a public utility within the Philippines, any explosives, flammable, corrosive or poisonous substance or material,